Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of ChatArgos, which is the ChainArgos' weekly podcast. My name is Patrick Tan, General Counsel for ChainArgos, the blockchain intelligence firm made famous for outing Binance's BUSD $1.4 billion under collateralization. We've done a lot more news since then. That's just the one that we're most famous for. With me, as usual, every week, CEO, Chief Data Scientist, Jonathan Reiter. Jonathan, thanks for being on the show. Not that you had a choice.
Indeed.
But thank you for and thank you for watching. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for all those comments. Thank you for the likes. Thank you for the subscribes. We really appreciate it when you do that. That's why we enjoy doing the show. A lot of stuff to unpack this week. We've had SBF on the stand, so we'll talk about that, obviously. But let's run through what we're going to talk about. First, we're going to talk a little bit about the Wall Street Journal, the stats, and some of the controversies surrounding Elizabeth Warren's letter to the Biden administration to say put an end to this stuff. Some exaggerations there. How to separate the fact from the fiction. What is really the problem with the stats that have been put out by Elliptic, have been backed up by us? Is there any problem? We'll talk about that. Talk about TUSD as well. We saw TUSD issue, well, okay. As far as we're concerned, functionally, TUSD or somebody within TUSD issued the T-Euro.
Historically TUSD-controlled wallet deployed, yeah.
I don't know how to put it, but we'll talk about that. So we'll talk about T-Euro, the TCNY, and some of the historical wallets which they've denied and disavowed, and why that doesn't really make sense. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about the SBF trial. We have our man on in the courtroom actually, but watching in the overflow area. So there you go. And we'll talk about that. And that's it for this. That's it for this week's show. So let's just jump straight in. Wall Street Journal stats. Let's talk a little bit about this brouhaha about how it was. First of all, there was an Elliptic report which said that, so a bit of context here, Elliptic report said that $93.7 million was funneled through, raised, however you want to phrase it, to wallets linked to Hamas.
Sorry, that amount of money passed through. Last week we talked about stock versus flow issues,
yes,
measures, but that was the quantum of dollars that sort of flowed through a network of wallets that were identified by Israeli authorities as being associated with some terrorist groups. So that's the amount.
Yeah. And we checked those amounts, and they're accurate. So one of the things that was being, so Elizabeth Warren is a U.S. senator, and a couple other politicians, they wrote a letter basically in essence saying that, I think it was like 130 or something, lots
of people,
like a larger number that was kind of taken out of context. And then we saw on Twitter this move to get...
There was also some non-zero amount of fundraising using crypto stuff by some of these same terrorist groups. I say non-zero, and I think everyone agrees the amount was non-zero. It may have been very small, but it was not zero. There was then some conflation of the total amount of flow and or the amount of stock of dollars passing through all of this network, including some service providers, intermediaries, bureau de change, OTC desk types, and the amount of money raised is like charitable donation type stuff. And then the headline on this Wall Street Journal story referred to these people raising millions via crypto donations, and then a bunch of U.S. politicians referred to essentially up to the maximum number they could come up with having been raised via crypto donations.
Yeah.
In some sense, it's true because, up to $5 billion were raised through this, but nowhere near $5 billion. Right?
Yeah.
We talked about this a lot last week, where the fraction of money that goes through a dodgy money changer that's associated with dodgy people isn't zero because they're a dodgy money changer, but it also isn't 100%. In this case, no one was actually alleging that 100 million, 93 million, whatever, was raised as charitable contributions, but a non-zero amount was. And then there was a conflation of these amounts. I don't think we know exactly the maximum that could have been raised in charity, whatever. Specific programs have been tagged. The Wall Street Journal article, I think, generally people agree was fine.
Yeah.
The Wall Street Journal headline, and people may not know this, generally the journalist does not write the headline. The editor, layout people, whatever, deal with the headlines. You write an article, the headline is not written by you. The headline was maybe marginally misleading.
A bit more aggressive.
But again, headlines are not fact-checking the way that the contents of the story are.
Yeah.
So there's some brouhaha, and there has, at least up until now, no corrections have been issued. Elliptic issued a statement essentially saying it was not a retraction. It's been referred to as a retraction. It was not a retraction. I think they would agree with My description of it is not a retraction. It was a, you've misrepresented our data. Please don't do that. We stand by our data. We don't stand by your conclusions. That's okay. Like I have a lot of sympathy for that. Having made very specific statements many times in my life and had people not interpret them in the way that they were intended, right? So, all right. Anyway, there's now some political brouhaha around that. I don't know. These are difficult problems, right?
And it goes back to the last week's episode where we talked about stock to flow. Like if $100 million
stock versus
stock versus flow.
Stock to flow is
stock to flow is the Bitcoin thing.
It's not a thing we'll be talking about.
No, sorry. Stock versus flow. If $100 million runs through a system, but it runs through 5 times, is it 500 million or is it 100 million? Yeah. So that's a difficult question. A politician will say that's 500 million because they want to overplay the severity of the problem.
These are public policy issues. These are quite literally political issues. That's the way people debate political issues. We're not here to talk about whether that's right or wrong or the way politics should work, because it just is.
Whereas in essence, was there ever more than $100 million? Nah, not.
At the same time, if you have some group, it doesn't even matter, good group, bad group, whatever, and they have $100 million and they raised at least 100,000 of those dollars from charity, where the other 99 point whatever million dollars come from? It came from somewhere. I don't know. The people who gave the money, whether it was charity or otherwise, or I have no clue. Probably there's some charities we don't know about. Probably there's some other stuff we don't know about. Probably there's stuff we don't want to know about. These are hard problems. And the biggest issue I've had with a lot of the debate is that people seem to be expecting a standard of proof that is not just unreasonable, but unreal, like not going to happen, unachievable. Yeah. So, can you point out exactly how many of these dollars came from charity versus these other 6 sources? Even if these were legitimate businesses, that might be challenging. You're talking about, like literally outlaw terrorist group. Come on. There's some percentage that came from that. Maybe don't take it so seriously. Maybe don't be so offended when someone who's opposed to your infrastructure tries to round the numbers up and you round the numbers down. I mean, there have been people on the other side saying that the amounts associated with these bad actors are de minimis. There's no evidence that's true either, because you're proving that something didn't happen, right? That's challenging. Anyway, that's a bit of a rant, perhaps, but it seems like the Wall Street Journal was basically correct with a somewhat misleading headline in a way that lots of newspapers have headlines.
Well, I mean, the headline is supposed to be to get you to click. That's the point. Yeah. It's supposed to be a bit clickbaity.
Yeah, but the article seems to have been okay.
Yeah.
And no one retracted the information that was...
no one should have to.
The providers, the report, whatever that we're reporting on, was not retracted. They seem to have said, we don't like the way you describe this, and we really disagree with the way these other people interpreted the article that you wrote. I mean, to some extent, that's just part and parcel of writing stuff that's related to public policy and having people debate it, right? I mean, talk to anybody that's been a government official in a policy-making capacity, and they'll tell you that it's challenging in that direction, right?
In any event, I guess the bigger question is, should the quantum matter so much? Because is it sort of less bad that only 1 million was laundered as opposed to 500 million? That's a policy question. That's not a technical question. It's a policy question. Like, is it zero tolerance, or is it, small fraction, not a big deal?
And it does seem clear that a lot of these service providers experience higher rates of questionable activity than in highly regulated traditional finance providers. No one thinks 10% of the money passing through any major bank is associated with these kinds of bad actors. I mean, that's just not a thing.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know whether it's 1 basis point, a tenth of a basis point, 2 basis points. We're not having that debate. It's not 10%. Right. I mean, there may be some specific bank doing some dodgy stuff. I mean, large, global, whatever. Whereas you do see evidence of meaningful amounts flowing through some of these places, and no one's even saying they're not trying to help. I mean, Tether's made a lot of comments about how they help the police and whatever. Okay, like whatever, fine, have a good time. No one's even suggesting that's not happening. Just that failure to acknowledge that a significant amount, and by significant I mean even maybe single-digit percentage, of the money flowing through these guys are bad actors, isn't going to help you long term, because if you pretend the number is 0 and the number isn't 0, some politician is going to get you nailed to the wall.
Yeah.
Because that's how this goes.
Yeah. All right, now on to your favorite pet subject, TUSD. What's going on? So, a bit of context. T-Euro and TCNY, out of nowhere. Now, TCNY, I don't know if you guys really know the irony behind that. It's called the true Chinese yuan. I mean, guys. Okay, anyway. A T euro is supposed to be a euro stablecoin. TCNY is supposed to be the equivalent RMB.
But there is a TCNH, so anyway. Onshore, offshore Chinese currency trading is not the subject of this podcast either.
So, and then very quickly, TUSD said that TrueUSD came out to say that, look, this has nothing to do with us. We didn't issue out these tokens. Soon after, they had been hacked. Sometime they came out to say that they had been hacked around September. Soon after that, these tokens sprout out from nowhere, start to do some volume, and then
and these tokens were deployed by the address that deployed their contracts years ago.
Correct.
So in some sense, they are absolutely related, but it is also, of course, possible that
they were compromised.
Have the keys from 2 years ago or something.
So it's possible they were compromised. Now, they came out and said, this has nothing to do with us. That begged further questions, and we have some of the answers.
Yeah, okay. So we cannot, of course, speak to specifically whether the specific set of deployment keys was compromised, because you're asking me whether somebody copied files on a thumb drive in an office I don't have access to. I have no opinion on whether or not any of that happened. But if they want to talk about deployment addresses, we can talk about deployment addresses. We've put some stuff up on Twitter on this. So the address that deployed their contracts on Tron, and addresses that own contracts on Tron, own the token controller, on-chain admin addresses that are unquestionably the TUSD devs, are also on-chain admin addresses for SunSwap and some other Justin Sun complex affiliated projects. And in a particularly amusing turn of events, some of their dev admin addresses actually are users of the TUSD protocol and redeem tokens through addresses that are also associated with Justin Sun. And we even know, the details are on the Twitter, whatever, but we even know that these guys were onboarded as a customer in 2020 when ownership was not through the Asia-based conglomerate Tecteryx, and redeemed tokens at that time. So they had passed through whatever KYC procedures and onboarded. And those same addresses subsequently were used by the devs of the system alongside the devs of some of the Sun-related SunSwap tokens and whatnot system. So it's clear that people associated with that group are the devs of TUSD, right? And there's a TC and H and whatnot on Tron as well. And this is unquestionably true because these addresses were used back and forth at the same time. There's even one wonderful situation in which an address associated with the SunSwap complex tries to mint some tokens and modify a minting list on-chain smart contract call, gets rejected, and then moments later a different address that's also associated with the same Justin Swan complex redemption, but is a TUSD address. Oh, that one submits the same smart contract call and it goes through. So you can tell it's the same dev because like 30 seconds later, oh, wrong, whatever, keyboard, submit the thing. So we know that they have had keys in that context shared with Justin Sun projects. We know that with absolute certainty because you can see that. And we also know that essentially the only customer of the protocol on Tron and the only meaningful sized customer since Alameda Research disappeared, we'll come back to that one in a second, has also been this Justin Sun collection of wallets. It's not even clear if anyone else is using this thing. It is possible that the largest user of TUSD, the only real user of TUSD, is the dev team, which is also the SunSwap dev team. There's pretty solid evidence that that's the case. Alameda Research was the only other relatively recent large user. They were only a user for about 6 weeks. 2021, I think it's May, June, they put through $650 million or so dollars, and that's it. Other than that, this is all that's going on. There's a wonderful bar chart in one of our tweets that shows amount redeemed by client, and you can basically see like 2 bars. One of them's big, some of them are tiny, and then it's all just flat lines at 0 because they're irrelevant amounts. One guy did billions, and then the rest of them, there's hundreds of addresses doing like 50 grand, 2 grand, like not real amounts, going back for years. So, the deployer addresses have been shared before, and it is certainly possible that they were compromised and or the left hand does not know what the right hand is doing, because if you're deploying SunSwap and the Sun token at the same time as the True Dollar and administering the True Dollar on-chain, whatever smart contracts, I don't know how good your security procedures are, so good luck with that. this is an evolving story. There will be more information to come.
So if you want all the details, I recognize that it may not everybody's auditory, and that might have been a lot to consume. Go down to our Twitter handle. It's at ChainArgos, ChainArgos, destroyer of stablecoins. Go and have a look.
We didn't do these. So these transactions were put through in some cases in 2020 and early 2021. This information has been sitting in public for a long time.
Yeah, that's right.
I read some old notes following some of this stuff. Sorry. So we didn't do this, just like with the Binance stuff. We didn't
do any of this stuff. No. So excuse me. Yep. So have a look at that on the Twitter feed. X, whatever. So have a look at it. It's on the company page. It's got plenty of charts, plenty of details, all the addresses. So you can link it up. Finally, one of our guys is actually at the SBF trial. So I want to share a little bit of a nugget with you, in case for those of you guys who didn't manage to actually get in on the trial. And it's very simple, basically. On last week, basically all of his previous cronies, they just said, prosecutor was like, did you steal money? Yes. Why did you steal the money? Because SBF told me to. That's essentially the crux of the matter in front of the jury.
It was because SBF told me to, and he said he'd give me some percentage of it. Because essentially all of them acknowledged that the stolen money was used to buy things for themselves.
So real estate, whatever the case may be. And then this part was, so now what they're doing is, so SBF, they're not in front of a jury. The prosecutor and the judge is trying to determine whether or not some of the stuff is relevant to present before a jury. So think of it as a test run, if you will. Essentially, and this one is...
So how common is this legally, where you have the defendant testify without the jury in a practice run to determine if the defendant's testimony is actually relevant to their own defense? It's a wild concept for me as a non-lawyer.
All right, so...
I assume this is not common. But.
No, so usually... this stuff is already settled before, like even things like whether the defendant's going to testify, but the defendant has a right up to the last minute to change his mind, testify and stuff like that. So if he's going to testify, it could be a situation where the prosecution can object to whatever he's going to, because it's not relevant to the case.
Okay, so if you're just going to talk about how you were unhappy because...
If you're going to talk about like Celsius staking or Solana staking and stuff like that, that's just not relevant to the case.
Just to confuse or whatever.
Correct. If it's going to waste the court's time, obfuscate.
I did not know that. So the judge can say you can't testify in your defense because what you plan to say is irrelevant.
It's not relevant to
something like that.
Yeah,
I did not know that. Okay.
So this is a beautiful exchange. Prosecutor says, so you believed from counsel that terms of service allowed you to take the money? Yes. SBF says yes. Prosecutor says, here's the terms of service. Can you show me where it says that? She presents the document, and this is a classic one, which I think will go down like maybe Johnny Cochran style. Just let me know if you want to look at another page. And silence. You could hear a pin drop in the courtroom. So if this had been in front of a jury, she would have completely slayed him.
Which you got to think suggests that if there is a discussion in front of the jury, she has other stuff to say because... it's a dry run for both sides, and whatever you think of this particular case, these prosecutors are not incompetent.
No.
They do appear to know how to question witnesses.
Prosecutor, did FTX have a document retention policy, SBF? I believe I discussed it with counsel. Prosecutor, was that policy written down? SBF, I believe so. Prosecutor, where is that document? I do not know.
Yeah, I mean, some of this, he clearly is trying to rely on advice of counsel, which is fair. And again, I'm not an expert in these details, but you have to be able to prove that counsel told it to you.
Yeah.
Just say, I think the lawyer told me this. Is not.
No. So finally, leave you with this one. This one's brilliant. Prosecutor, did you know that Alameda had a negative balance? SBF, what do you mean by negative? She should have said, what do you mean by negative? Well, she says, I mean when you subtract A from B, the number is less than 0. Yeah. And SBF goes, what do you mean by less than? Now, for those of you who weren't in the courtroom, the judge was very, very pissed off with SBF by this stage. Yeah. He had kind of gotten tired, but he did it in a very professional way. He said, this defendant seems to answer questions in a very interesting way, which is legalese for, do you speak English? mother, boop,
Yeah.
from the Pulp Fiction bit.
Yeah. Say
So-
what again? Yeah. Indeed.
Say what again? Yeah, exactly. For that Samuel L. Jackson scene from Pulp Fiction, which we all love. So, fine, whatever the case may be. John has an interesting take, not an interesting take, but it's a fair legal strategy as to why SBF's counsel may have brought things to kind of obfuscate and confuse and talk about staking and stuff like that.
Okay, so, I mean, everyone will agree that the case here is at least reasonably strong. I mean, no one looks at this and thinks, oh, they're never going to convict that guy, right?
Yeah.
It's not that kind of a situation. At the same time, and never came off in interviews like he's going to be the most trustworthy,
Correct.
organized witness ever in his own defense. But in the American legal system, to convict the guy, they need all 12 of the jurors to say he's guilty. To not convict the guy, defense only has to convince one person that there is reasonable doubt they didn't do it. Okay, and given how high profile this trial is, if the jury says he's not guilty, done. If the jury can't make a decision, they would have to try him again. It's a hung jury. It is difficult to see how many times you can do this for high-profile trials. They certainly might try again, whatever. Also, if you have a hung jury and they think they can try you again, you're in a pretty good position to negotiate a lower whatever plea thing. Assuming that everyone involved is an intelligent, organized human being, whatever you think of his parents' views overall, they are clearly well-educated law professors and aren't dumb. I don't know whether he listens to them. I have no clue. One way of looking at this is a reasonable way of convincing at least one person on the jury that, I have a reasonable doubt he didn't do it because this guy seems to think the lawyers told him over and over. Now, being frankly an arrogant jackass on the witness stand is not going to help you.
It's not going to engender well.
That doesn't seem like the right way to go. But acting like you don't really understand what you're being asked, and that the lawyers told you to do this, and it's all very complicated.
Unless it's a situation where you have an equivalent like Sammy the Bull Gravano who went to compromise one of the jurors, then that's a different story.
Well, I mean, it's not that sort of At the same time, pissing the judge off is only a problem if you get convicted.
Yeah, correct.
Right. You can now, you might decide, look, if I get convicted, I'm going to prison for the rest of my life anyway, so pissing the judge off makes no difference.
Yeah.
And for somebody who claimed to be very, plan stuff out, game theory, I can completely understand him sitting down and saying, there's no downside to pissing the judge off if they're going to convict me anyway. My only chance here is to convince one or two jurors that, there's a reasonable chance I didn't do it. And this strategy is aimed at that. In the same way, famously, scammer emails have bad grammar, have bad spelling, because you want to filter out people that aren't going to give you any money.
Yeah.
And this strategy probably appeals to the type of person who would say, I have reasonable doubt as to whether or not he did it. I'm not criticizing those people either. I'm just saying this way of generating this noise and these weird questions is probably more appealing to those people than it is to everybody else. I don't know any of the jurors personally. I'm not even sure I could say if I did, but I don't. I'm not even checked, to be fair, so maybe. I can see that being a strategy. And frankly, given the situation he was in,
why not, right?
Maybe that's the only strategy. It's difficult to think of another one. When all of your employees, partners, and lawyers, one of his lawyers flew over from Japan just to testify against him. Yeah, that's not a great scene. I don't know.
Finally. So on that note, a little bit of shout out.
Sorry, so just to be clear,
okay.
I don't think there's a 100% chance that this guy is found guilty because there's a reasonable chance that the jury comes back and says,
I know.
We can't decide, sorry.
Because you could pay off one of the jurors.
That's not what I'm saying.
Anyway, so if you're going to be in Hong Kong next week, we're less than a week away. We will be at the Hong Kong Convention and Exhibition Center from the 2nd to the 3rd November. Interestingly enough, if you want to attend the Hong Kong FinTech Festival, it's absolutely free on the 3rd of November. 2nd is a trade day, so you have to pay for tickets. 3rd is completely free. Come by and see us at the booth. We're at startup booth ES010A. Come by and say hi. There will be swag, but I don't think we have enough swag to give out to anybody.
We have swag?
We have swag. Yeah, we have swag.
All right.
So
the t-shirts might be worn, but
yeah,
they're not going to be. No.
So come by and say hi. And if you happen to be at the convention center, that will be the last exhibition I believe that we'll be doing for this year. So if you happen to be in Hong Kong next week, we'd love to say hi to you. Otherwise, yep. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for all the feedback. We've tried our best to improve the audio. It's a work in progress. We appreciate your patience. Thank you for likes, subscribes. Hit us up in the comment section if there's something that you want us to cover or talk about in the following week. In fact, next week we'll be doing the show from Hong Kong because we'll be on the floor.
We're not bringing these mics, right?
We're not bringing these mics.
Okay, fair enough.
So we'll see you in Hong Kong next week. Otherwise, from all of us here at ChainArgos, good talking. See you again soon. Bye-bye.